Shut down while trying to report a fire at my high school. When I was a senior back in high school in Middle Tennessee, we had a smoking area for the students. This was 1990, so yeah, I'm old. My daughters actually just asked me to post this story here. Anyway, so I was a good student and had a great reputation among the faculty at this school of about 2,000 students. During class, I am running an errand for a teacher when I walk by the smoking area. It is outside of course, but it is against one of the buildings and has a roof over it like a carport. There is a large metal trash can in the middle. And it is on fire. Not a rip-roaring fire, but is on fire nonetheless. We have flames starting to work their way out of there and plenty of smoke. I decide I don't need to pull a fire alarm, but clearly, I need to get a staff member to put this fire out. There's no one around, so I make a fast trot up to the main office. As I quickly enter, I see the secretary talking to another student, so with a loud voice I say, "Ms. Knight, Ms. Knight, there's a..." And that's when the assistant principal rounds the corner behind Ms. Knight while ripping into me about how we wait our turn in here and how I am being disrespectful and loud and I need to stand there and wait until I am called forward. Okay, and then I just stood there while Ms. Knight kept helping the other student as Mr. Evil assistant principal stood overwatch in the corner like a bouncer. Finally, after a few minutes, it was my turn. I calmly walked up to the counter and said, "Ms. Knight, the large trash can in the smoking area is on fire." The assistant principal yells out, "What?" and then burst out of the room while Ms. Knight just gasped. I calmly turned around and walked out, and went back to class.
Now to the comments. What is it about Tennessee and refusing to acknowledge that kids can't recognize or communicate emergencies? 5th grade science lab. Working with cobalt chloride, 1975, there were poison warnings all over its container, but one of my group stirs the solution and pops the straw into her mouth. I calmly said, "Get that out of your mouth. It's poison." Chick freaks and starts bawling. Teacher jerks me up by the arm, takes me outside the door and gives me a paddling. Next year, I'm messing around, waiting on my youth league basketball game, when I made a serious miscalculation and broke my wrist. Very visibly. I went to the concession stand, where the director is taking orders. "Miss K? Excuse me. Wait your turn like everybody else." I waited. 10 to 15 minutes pass, my hand is sitting on top of my arm, and swelling by the minute. I silently try to get her attention again. She looks away, pointedly ignoring me. Finally, it starts dying down, but she's doing a quick cleanup. Not even sure how long it's been, by now, but I'm feeling nauseated and lightheaded. I call out for her again. She barks something implying I'm being rude again, and I matter-of-factly hold up my arm, and say, "I think I broke my wrist." She snapped to, and shit finally got serious. SMH.
5th grade science lab, working with cobalt chloride, 1975, there were poison warnings all over its container, but one of my group stirs the solution and pops the straw into her mouth. I calmly said, "Get that out of your mouth. It's poison." Chick freaks and starts bawling. Teacher jerks me up by the arm, takes me outside the door and gives me a paddling. There are so many things wrong with this I can't even.
Grew up in Tennessee. Was paddled every 3 days for the last half of 4th grade, like clockwork. Duck you Mrs. Sane. And duck the school system and culture that co-signed it. Love it. No room for emergencies, huh? I found a fire in my grade school. My friend had been hurt and had surgery and I stayed inside with him at lunchtime to take care of him and keep him company. Went to the bathroom and found a trash can on fire, pulled the fire alarm and wheeled my friend to the exit on the opposite side of the building to go past the office. Fire marshal, head fireman there, somehow got it in his head since I found it, I said it. Took the teachers and principal a couple hours to set him straight. It turns out all the older kids knew who did it, he just had to ask.
Fire marshal, head fireman there, somehow got it in his head since I found it, I said it. I guess whoever smelled it, dealt it never goes away for some people.
I have guilt issues still from being a child. I'd find something, do the honest thing and return it and get accused of stealing. Now whenever something goes wrong, I assume I'm to blame. One time in high school I was walking by a bathroom and saw smoke coming out. I peeked in and saw that someone had set the trash can on fire. I then reported this to the nearest staff member. Later, I was brought in to the principal for questioning as a suspect because I was seen coming out of the bathroom.
If you find a fire, just stay there so no one sees you leaving.
r/shitty life pro tips. So did they learn their lesson? Or were they the type to never admit fault?
OP replied. Nothing was ever said to me about this event by any staff member.
Guarantee that Ms. Knight remembered that encounter. I was playing tetherball back in grade 3 and the guy I was playing against fell and smashed his face on the metal pole. Both the big front teeth, long roots, popped out to the ground and he started to cry. I ran over to the noon hour supervisor and she was talking to a student already. Same thing. Wait your turn. I wait for like the longest 30 seconds in the world and then she goes, and what do you want? I just pointed and said, can you please help? She gasped. Buddy still saved his teeth.
Ooh. Good thing he didn't have his adult teeth yet, I guess.
Actually, if he was in grade 3 and they still had roots, they were likely his adult teeth. The central incisors come in around 7 to 8 years old. Oh, there is one employee like that at every single school. You handled it perfectly. I hope you didn't get into trouble. Oh, I remember when high schools had smoking areas. In my school it was called the tobacco area. Possession of tobacco on school grounds outside of the smoking area was a major infraction, which more than a few parents pointed out was crazy. If you let students use tobacco, you have to let them have tobacco. Our principal couldn't figure out why anyone had a problem with the tobacco rules, but my high school handbook had another interesting rule. Guns were only allowed to be kept in a locked vehicle or locked in the gun rack in your vehicle. We have a bunch of families involved in agriculture in our area. If you are working a ranch or farm, you need a gun handy. Our state has a lot of snakes. So, guns were allowed, but only in your car. I still have that old high school handbook and my kids were totally astounded when they read the rule about guns.
My school handbook cited horseplay as an infraction and proceeded to describe horseplay in great detail.
Our handbook only says that horseplay in the halls was an infraction. This became a big deal my senior year. A classmate was given a punishment for horseplay. He brought the handbook to the school board because the principal insisted that the rule was horseplay anywhere is against the rules. But that is not what the handbook says. So, the school board took my classmate's side because the handbook is very clear. They also told the principal she could not change the handbook or the rule without their okay. This classmate was always sliding around the rules. He put a coffee maker and a mini Christmas tree in his locker, and lights all around the locker door. He just came in one weekend and taped some extension cords down to run electricity to his actual locker. He never locked it, and a bunch of us would chip in for the coffee, and we all just helped ourselves to his coffee. No one ever even commented on the fact that his locker had electricity. At the end of the year, he took his extension cords home. Somewhat along these lines, summer of 1995, I was driving through the west side of Chicago en route home and saw a vacant lot on fire on one of the major east-west streets such as Madison. This was before mobile phones were widespread, so I looked for a payphone to report it. Dialed 911 from the phone, about a 1/4 mile down the street, and the call taker asked me for my present location. Where am I calling from? Never mind that I already supplied the fire's location. She then argued with me that the intersection from which I was calling didn't match her records. Never mind the fire that's underway. It gets worse. She then gets a sergeant on the line and he rips into me about the payphone location discrepancy, accusing me of lying. At that point I said, "Look, I was taught as a kid that if I see a fire, I need to call the fire department. There's a vacant lot on fire a short distance from here. I am just doing my civic duty, but if you want to let it burn and have another great Chicago fire on your head, that's on you. Sorry to have bothered." And I hung up. At this point I wondered if they'd bother sending CFD in response. I drove back by the same lot and at that point firefighters were hosing down the lot from their truck, so at least Chicago didn't burn that day like it did in 1871.
See, I've never understood the American system of having the police dispatch all services. Here in the UK there are a series of national, regional, call centres run by British Telecom who immediately answer all emergency calls with emergency, which service. You then tell them police, fire, ambulance, or Coast Guard and they transfer your call to the appropriate regional call centre for that particular service, but they then stay on the line in case the emergency service needs the phone line traced to provide an address and to keep the line permanently occupied if the calling party hangs up or is overcome or has to leave for a minute, etc. The emergency service call center, be that fire, police, ambulance, etc., then deal with the calling party. They can request resources from the other emergency services if required, but they make that decision in the background and dispatch the call to another call handler at the other call center themselves, either via phone or via a shared dispatch system of some sort. If you need an additional service like mountain rescue, those calls tend to be dealt with by the police dispatchers if the call doesn't fit into any of the other categories. So just being lost on a mountain will get you the police control room, but being lost on a mountain and hurt will get you the ambulance control room, who will call mountain rescue or the Coast Guard to provide a helicopter if the injury is serious or life-threatening. I suppose it's down to the American system being very localized with lots of small-scale dispatch rooms for local police forces, plus the fact that most ambulances are privately run and fire departments are mostly volunteers, I suppose.
In my experience, which is thankfully limited, your call is answered by a call center. The call center may be located in the police station, but they're not cops, and always ask what's your emergency. It's just a government building where there's always other people, so it saves a lot of money rather than having the call takers/dispatchers in a whole other building that also costs money.